Today with this grandmother, you will learn about how to improve communication and understanding in relationships. If you want to discover the best advice a grandmother could give you, stay until the end of the video. If you enjoy this type of video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more videos like this. We will explore important aspects of human psychology, how men can learn to better understand their partner's emotions and needs, and how to build a relationship based on respect and empathy. The first thing I want to share is that relationships are not about competing or always being right, but about understanding each other. The bad thing about trying to win every argument is that even if you win the fight, you can lose your partner's heart. Sometimes, it is more important to listen carefully than to have the last word. There is a difference between listening to respond and listening to understand. The latter requires patience and humility, and believe me, that is where the best relationships flourish. Let me tell you something I learned from watching a couple who is a friend of mine. He worked long hours and believed he was fulfilling his role as a husband by providing financially, but his wife felt emotionally abandoned. One day she told him, "I don't need more money, I need more of you." That opened his eyes. Sometimes what we think the other person needs isn't what they really crave. That's why it's crucial to ask and observe rather than assume. At this point, let me talk about emotions. One thing that many men can improve is recognizing them, both in themselves and in others. The downside of ignoring emotions is that they don't go away. They build up like a pressure cooker until they explode. It's okay if you feel vulnerable or don't have all the answers. Showing your emotions doesn't make you less of a man, but more human. And when your partner expresses theirs, they're not always looking for a solution. Sometimes they just need to feel like you're listening and present. One piece of advice I always give is to learn to read between the lines. Human psychology is complex, and words don't always reflect what the other person is feeling. For example, if your partner says, "It's okay," but you notice that their tone and body language say otherwise, it's important to probe tactfully. Ask lovingly without pressure and show that you care. Phrases like, "I know something's bothering you. I'm here when you want to talk," can make a big difference. The downside of not expressing gratitude is that over time, the other person may feel unappreciated. Something as simple as saying, "Thank you for doing this for me," or "I really appreciate what you do," can deeply strengthen a relationship. Gratitude feeds love while indifference wears it out. Remember, too, that respect is the foundation of everything. Speaking with respect doesn't mean avoiding conflict, because it's inevitable in any relationship. But it does mean that even in the most intense disagreements, you should never use hurtful or disparaging words. The downside of saying something in a moment of anger is that it can stay in the other person's memory for years, even after you've forgotten it. Finally, I want you to think about the value of shared time. The downside of being together physically but emotionally absent is that, even though you share a space, you are not connected. Put down the phone, turn off the television, and dedicate exclusive moments to share, talk, and enjoy each other's company. The best relationships are not built with grand gestures, but with small, everyday moments filled with attention and love. So, dear, take these reflections with you. Listen more, speak with kindness, appreciate those you love, and never stop learning. Because in the end, life is not measured by what you accumulate, but by the deep connections you build. Another thing I have always learned is that in a relationship, it is not enough to love. You have to learn to love well. Many times, people love in their own way, but they do not stop to think if that way of loving is what the other person needs. Stay until the end and discover the most important lesson only a grandmother can teach you. If you enjoy this type of video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more videos like this. For example, there are those who show love with gifts, but what their partner really wants is quality time or words of affirmation. For this, I always recommend that both parties ask themselves, how can I make you feel more loved? It is a simple question, but your answers can open a new world of understanding. Now, speaking of loving well, I must mention how important it is to learn to apologize. The bad thing about not knowing how to ask for forgiveness is that small wounds become big resentments. Apologizing is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it is an act of humility and maturity. And a simple "I'm sorry" is not enough. True forgiveness must be accompanied by a commitment to improvement, such as saying, "I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I didn't mean to, and I want to make sure it doesn't happen again." It shows that you care about both the person and the relationship. Throughout my life, I have seen couples break up not because they don't love each other, but because they don't know how to take care of themselves emotionally. Sometimes, it's as simple as forgetting the little daily things. For example, when a couple stops saying good morning to each other with affection or saying goodbye with a kiss, those little disconnects add up. The bad thing about neglecting these details is that over time the spark and the daily affection are lost. Remember, great relationships don't die overnight. They slowly fade away if they are not taken care of. I once met a neighbor who, after 40 years of marriage, still made her husband's favorite coffee every morning. When I asked her why she did this, she replied, "It's my way of reminding him every day that I love him." That made me reflect on how powerful the language of actions is. Sometimes words aren't necessary. Actions that show care and dedication are enough. On the other hand, it is also important to talk about how we manage our expectations. The bad thing about expecting your partner to be perfect is that you will always feel disappointed. No one is perfect, neither you nor the person you love. A healthy relationship is based on accepting each other's imperfections and finding beauty in them. Don't focus on what is missing. Appreciate what you have together and work to improve as a team. Something that many men should know is that love does not mean controlling or solving everything. Many times, your partner does not look for you to give them an answer to their problems, but rather to be their support, to give them a hug or to simply say, "I am here with you." Do not underestimate the power of being present. In my youth, I remember that I used to worry too much about trying to solve everything for others. But over the years I learned that sometimes, the best thing you can offer is your time and your understanding. And now, I do not want us to forget an essential aspect of any relationship: personal growth. The bad thing about depending completely on a partner to feel complete is that you end up losing yourself. Each person must have their own path, their own interests, and their own space. Loving does not mean absorbing the other, but growing together without losing individuality. When both are happy and fulfilled separately, they can build a stronger and more balanced relationship. To close, I want to leave you with one last thought. Love is not about finding someone who will make your life perfect, but about building an imperfect but beautiful life with that person. There will be difficult moments, but if there is respect, communication, and mutual effort, any challenge can be overcome. Never forget that love is a verb, something you do, something you cultivate every day. So, my child, take these words with you. Practice patience, respect, and care. Listen more, understand better, and above all, love with intention and sincerity. If you're interested in learning the wisest advice a grandmother could give, don't miss the end of the video. If you enjoy this type of video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more videos like this. Because at the end of the road, what really matters is not how much time you spent with someone, but how they made you feel and how they made them feel. That is the true richness of life. Another important lesson I want to share is about the power of second chances. Throughout life, we all make mistakes, whether out of pride, ignorance, or simply because we are human. The bad thing about not giving or accepting second chances is that you miss out on the chance to fix what was broken and learn from your mistakes. Of course, a second chance doesn't mean ignoring what happened, but rather working together to repair the damage and grow as people. I remember an old friend of mine who, after a big argument with his wife, went months without speaking openly to her. He entrenched himself in his pride, waiting for her to make the first move. When they finally sat down to talk, they discovered that they both wanted to reconcile, but neither knew how to start. Wasting valuable time by not talking is a hard lesson to learn. That's why I tell you, if you love someone, don't let pride be bigger than your feelings. There is always a time to reach out and say, "Can we try again?" Also, I want to talk about the balance between giving and receiving in a relationship. The bad thing about giving everything without expecting anything in return is that you can end up exhausted, feeling empty and without the strength to continue. But it is also harmful to constantly expect to receive without giving anything. Love should be a constant exchange of energy where both feel valued and supported. If you feel like you are giving too much and receiving little, it is time to have an honest conversation with your partner. Now, a piece of advice for men in particular. Don't be afraid to show yourself vulnerable. Many times, men are brought up to hide their emotions, to be strong at all times. But the bad thing about repressing your feelings is that you end up disconnecting not only from yourself but also from others. Vulnerability is not a weakness. It is a form of connection. Talking about your fears, your insecurities, or your dreams not only frees you, but also allows the other person to get closer to you. Speaking of this, I remember a neighbor who lost his wife after years of marriage. He confessed to me that one of the things he regretted most was not having told her how much he needed her when she was alive. He had always wanted to appear strong and self-sufficient, but then he understood that showing his emotional dependence did not make him less of a man, but more human. Since then, I have repeated this advice to all the young men I know. Never pass up the opportunity to say how you feel, because those words can change everything. Another important reflection is about the cycles in a relationship. The bad thing about expecting everything to always be exciting and perfect is that you get disillusioned when the routine moments come. But routine is not the enemy. In fact, it can be the place where true love grows. Learning to find beauty in the small moments, like cooking together, walking in silence, or simply sharing a coffee, is what really keeps the connection alive. Finally, I want to talk about forgiveness, not only towards others but towards yourself. The bad thing about carrying guilt or resentment is that it robs you of peace. Learn to forgive yourself for past mistakes and see them as lessons. And if someone has hurt you, remember that forgiveness is not always for them but for you. Letting go of resentment allows you to move forward, lighter and more at peace with yourself. So, dear reader, always remember that life is a work in progress. Relationships, like everything valuable, require work, patience, and constant care. Do not be afraid to learn, change, and grow, because therein lies the true richness of life. If you want to discover the best advice a grandmother could give you, stay until the end of the video. If you enjoy this type of video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more videos like this. And if you ever feel lost, remember that you can always return to these words and find a small beacon in the storm. May life fill you with love, understanding, and wisdom. And never forget that everything worthwhile requires effort, but the result will always be beautiful. It's important to understand that in relationships there won't always be consensus, and that's okay. The bad thing about expecting people to always think and feel the same way as you is that it creates an unrealistic expectation. Differences of opinion, disagreements, and even small fights are part of any relationship. But what really matters is how you handle those disagreements. The couples that have lasted, the ones that have really managed to build a life together, are those who know how to navigate differences with respect and understanding, instead of letting them turn into a war of egos. I remember one time when my husband and I had an argument over a trivial issue, or at least at the time it seemed trivial. We were organizing a birthday party for our daughter, and we couldn't agree on the decorations. I wanted something simpler while he imagined something much more elaborate. The tension grew so much that we almost gave in to the stress, completely forgetting the purpose of the celebration: to make our daughter feel special. It was at that moment that I learned that the essence of a relationship is not winning an argument, but finding a solution that makes both of you happy. Sometimes compromising is the answer, and other times, letting go of the need to be right is also a way to win. It's a lesson that men and everyone in general should learn. It's not about being the one who has the last word, but the one who knows when to shut up and listen. There are many times that the greatest act of love you can do is simply listening without interrupting, without trying to correct, but just being present. This, although it sounds simple, has immense power. The power of empathy is another fundamental issue in any relationship. The bad thing about not practicing it is that we end up living in a world isolated from others, without understanding their struggles or feelings. That's why I've learned over the years that empathy is not only understanding how the other person feels, but also being able to share their emotions, to put yourself in their shoes and feel what they feel. This kind of deep connection is the basis for building long-lasting relationships. My late mother used to tell me that love is not just a feeling but an action. It is more than the nice words and romantic gestures. It is the daily care, the small attentions, and sometimes the ability to put yourself in the other's shoes in the most difficult moments. She never stopped taking care of my father, even when he could no longer take care of himself. That care was not just physical but emotional. She stayed by his side, talked to him, asked him how he felt, and made him feel heard. That, my dear, is what makes love so long-lasting. The commitment to be there in good times and bad, to care for and nurture the relationship every day. Another aspect that I consider important is the ability to adapt. The bad thing about clinging to the idea that everything should stay the same is that you miss out on the wonderful changes and opportunities that life offers. People change, times change, circumstances change, and if we are not able to adapt, we risk being left behind. In relationships, this is even more crucial. As you spend time with someone, the relationship evolves, and what united you at the beginning, what made you fall in love, will no longer be the only thing that sustains the relationship. It is not about remaining static, but about evolving together, continuing to learn, share, and adapt to the new stages of life. I remember when my children grew up and left home. That transition was difficult for me, but also for my husband. We had been a team raising our little ones, and suddenly the dynamic changed. It was a time of adaptation, of adjusting our expectations and our routines. During that period, we realized how important it is to continue nurturing the relationship between us, even when the children were no longer under our roof. It was a new beginning, an opportunity to reconnect as a couple after so many years of being parents. In these moments, I understood that relationships are not something that are achieved once and then left aside. They are a continuous work, a daily construction, like a garden that needs to be watered, cared for, and pruned for it to flourish. No matter how many years you've been with your partner, there's always room for growth and renewal. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. Leave a comment to share your opinion and we'll take it into account for future videos.